So comparing densities based on behavior and density values. So here you have five blocks that are the same size, but they have different mass. The lightest one, which is this one, is 1, and the heaviest one is 5 kilograms. And the picture is showing how the 2 kilogram would float and the 5 one is floating. So and then it's asking you to draw here where the other blocks would fit in and explain why it will look this way. So if 2 is barely floating, or it is floating, then 1 must be floating a little more because the sizes are all the same. So the size is really not going to be a major difference here. So we can strictly go by the mass. So if 2 is floating this much, 1 should be a little less, and 3 should sink a little more, and 4 a little bit more, and 5 is all the way in the bottom. And you could explain that 4 could also be drawn in the bottom, but if 2 is floating, 3 and 4 are most likely to float also. So pretty much you could use that type of explanation to explain why you drew it that way, the box that way. Number 2, the picture shows a large block that is sinking in the water, and a much smaller block of the exact same material is sitting outside in the water. So it's asking you to draw it in the water and in a way of what you think will happen. Will the block float or sink, or does it depend? So this block should be drawn right over here in the bottom, and it will sink. That's because the density of the smaller block is the same as the big block. Why? Because they're made out of the same exact material, so their densities should be the same exact ones. In Unit 2, we have seen that reason why is because the particles will be packed the same way because they're the same particles in those blocks. And lastly, you have 5 blocks, and they all have different size and different shapes. They are made out of different materials, and you put them in the water, and you see that some are floating and some are sinking. Can you tell which one is the smallest density? Yes, smallest density will float the most, this one. You just have to label it yourself. You could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or A, B, C. In this case, C would float yes, and which one, C or 3, however you label it. Can you tell which one has large density? No, because these blocks are both sinking. We don't know their mass. We can tell that they have different sizes. Um, the bigger one, if it had a much bigger mass, it could still have a higher density. The smaller one, if it has a decent amount of mass, it can also have the higher density. So bottom line, we can't tell because the liquid in this case doesn't have a density that's close enough to separate these 2 blocks. We do know that they are much denser than the liquid because they're all the way in the bottom.